Greetings from a fishing village on the Atlantic coast. You've tuned in to Podcast Portwenn, celebrating the world of Doc Martin unofficially. I'm Chesla Wexler, and we'll be discussing Doc Martin, the medicine, the mayhem, and the marvelous people of Portwenn. Pauline returns to talk about Season 8 from a seen-it-all perspective. So come through and welcome back to Podcast Portwenn.
Hi, Chesla. Nice to see you again.
It is good to see you.
I've been really enjoying all the podcasts, not just my own. I try not to watch my own.
I don't have that luxury, sadly.
No. So everybody else's opinion is really appreciated, even the ones that are totally diametrically opposite to mine. And of course, they're all wrong, but never mind.
Right? Yes. It feels like that, doesn't it? It's fun.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy talking to everyone because, it keeps it fresh when you've seen the series.
Yes.
Yeah. So I enjoy that. And I do like hearing the new perspectives. I've had people suggest things that I never thought of, and all of a sudden they made new sense.
Yes. Yeah.
I
think some of the things that have come up, I haven't actually picked up on the program. So sometimes I've gone back and had a look and thought, yeah, that was right.
Yeah.
Not very many.
Well, the thing that struck me was when Judy pointed out the chorizo and the Scotch egg, and was she still in that mode of trying to make him be normal?
Yes, I just didn't understand that at all.
It made sense to me, like she's treating him like, okay, a normal person would appreciate a chorizo from Spain. That's what you bring from Spain.
True. On the other hand, she knows his dietary requirements, and I just thought it was a total insult to him. I really did. I couldn't fathom how anybody could be, and I'm going to use the word, I thought it was cruel.
See, you and I, we're both side to the Martin side of things, right? But I had the same perspective you had as far as the dietary side. But rather than like an insult or it being cruel, to me, it was like, does she not know him?
Well, yes, that's just...
Is she just not thinking?
No, I'm going to stick with cruel. I really do.
That's great, because I think if I average you and Judy, I get me.
Yeah, could be.
But it's so fun to think that there's a TV show that makes us try to think through a sausage. So we're here to talk about Season 8.
Right.
Which is, let's see, where does that one start?
It starts with Joe nearly getting married. But before that, Martin had been called out to an accident up on one of the farms, and there's a bloke with his hand stuck in some sort of mechanization, and Joe tries to help, which I honestly didn't think that guy was going to live.
I want to give full credit to all the people who do the prosthetics on that show.
Yeah.
The Foley artists who dub in the sounds, because anytime somebody gets injured, I'm just cringing with them.
Yeah. It's any wonder that Martin has a blood phobia with all that going on.
This is true. What a terrible place to be for a guy with a blood phobia, where they have winches and farm equipment and, no end of things that you can mangle yourself on.
Yeah. So, the other things that had happened was that Joe wanted Martin to be best man.
Right.
And I felt a bit sorry for Joe when Martin refused, but it wasn't unexpected, because I think he'd been asked before and always said no. So
he's not ready to join in the village yet.
No, not by a long shot.
And this was the season that came right after Louisa figures out that not everyone needs to be normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why I was quite surprised at her behaviour throughout the series. I found it totally self-centred.
Say more.
She didn't seem to connect with Martin at all. He was trying to make sure that she was happy and what she wanted to do would make her happy, and she seemed to take umbrage at some of the things he'd said. Mind you, when he said that you'll find the studying hard.
Maybe you'll pass, maybe you won't.
Yeah, I felt some sympathy for her there. But even James Henry, she didn't really seem to me to connect to him. She was quite content to sit there and try reading one of her essays or one of her books, and the other hand was out trying to feed the lad without looking at him.
Yes, he's getting yogurt all over the poor kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's not the way to go on. But I can't help it. I'm Team Martin.
And I'm Team Martin. I try so hard to be objective, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, this is also the season where she decides to do a career change.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
No, she wants to change. I think she's got bored with the paperwork involved in being headmistress, and she wants to get away from that because she's lost her contact with the children with having to do all the office work. And I can understand that. Yeah, that's perfectly logical. But then she takes forever to come to terms with it, to write her letter of resignation. Martin tries to help.
Completely insensitive. Like, he just doesn't get that this has been her life since, when you think about it, she probably started out with, what do you call kindergarten? Like the very first year of school.
Kindergarten.
It is kindergarten. You figure she's been there since she was, 4 or 5 years old?
Yeah.
Either as a student, then she went off to university, got her teaching certificate, came back, and this is her only job. At least from like what Holly was saying too. Like, Holly was her school buddy from when she went to university, right?
Yeah,
And then
that's right.
Holly was a headmistress at her own school, and Louisa had gone back to her little village. I guess I'd always presumed her entire time was there. But Martin had no sensitivity to the idea that you could be emotionally invested in not just the work, because I think he was emotionally invested in his work. But
Yes.
you kind of feel like he could do it at any prestigious London hospital.
Yes.
Whereas Louisa would be, this is Portwenn primary. This has been my whole life.
Yeah. You have to think about it, though. I mean, she would have finished teacher training by age 24, I would have thought.
Okay.
And if she spent the rest of her time, that's 17 years. Why wasn't she headmistress before then?
Well, I mean, if she was 24, it's only like, maybe she was in her, the first season, you think she's maybe, early 30s?
Yes.
Okay, so she's like 10 years.
Well, it'll be 10 years she'd been there.
Yeah.
You'd have thought she'd have made head before then.
Unless the last guy didn't retire.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, got to push somebody out.
Yeah. I think Martin and Louisa spent about 3 years. That was sort of the time frame I thought it was, getting together.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, immediately James Henry was on the scene.
You really don't necessarily have a sense in those early years how much time really passed. But I also had the sense that it was about 3 years.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Reassuring to see that I'm interpreting right.
Yeah. But yeah, so Louisa has this desire to change jobs. I also have a real sense from her that she feels like she does miss James when she goes to work, right?
I don't get that impression at all.
Really? Because she seems, doesn't she, or maybe it's in an earlier season when she's just having a really hard time leaving home. How old is James in 8?
About 18 months.
Okay, yeah. And we've already been through Mike Pruddy, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, now James is in nursery, so he's going off to Mel's place.
Right.
And
I thought Martin had a good solution there for getting James Henry home.
Yes, yeah.
And Louisa didn't object.
No. As I say, she seemed really self-centered in this episode, or this season. I find her ambivalence towards looking after James Henry, or not, infuriating, because to me, she should make her mind up, either one or the other, because I don't think she's doing a good job at either, to be truthful.
I think that her motivation to change her career has 2 driving forces behind it. One is, I think she does feel that it'll give her more time with him.
Yes.
So I think that that's a good sign that, like, she feels like she's missing out on him growing up.
Yes.
So, but also because, and she still says it in season 8 at some point, she doesn't want him to grow up to be like Martin. Doesn't that drive you nuts?
Don't get me started on that.
Well, my point there is, if you didn't like it, why'd you marry it?
Yes, yeah. I do think she loves him. I do think that. But her desire to be normal outweighs every other consideration. And why she thinks it's normal to go off to work and leave her baby behind is beyond me.
I wonder if her if her desire to be normal, it comes out of her, maybe she feels like she was an abnormal kid because her mom left and her father was a thief and in and out of trouble with the law. So being normal to her was always something that she didn't feel like she had. So she was always working towards it to be normal as a kid. And it's just kind of in
I
her.
don't know about normal there as being accepted as a good person, because clearly her parents weren't. But that, for me, even makes it harder to understand, why didn't you stay and look after your child?
Mm-hmm. Because she was abandoned by her own parents. And
Yeah. And I thought, well, that's exactly what you're doing to James Henry. That's just me.
I know enough parents, I know enough moms who feel like they absolutely want to have children,
Yes.
but they think that they are actually a better parent if they are also working, because the stay-at-home mom role drives them insane. Like the lack of the adult conversation, and maybe they've gone to a school, they've gotten a big degree, and they've got career goals, and putting that entirely on the shelf it's just not. But at the same time, they want to have both, and I wouldn't take that away from anybody. Sometimes people are just like, when I'm there, I'm a much better mom than I would be if I were there 24/7.
I do understand that to some extent. I stayed at home, and I struggle to understand why Louisa didn't, given that Martin could comfortably look after them. I do understand the adult conversation. I started at my Scrabble club in order to get out and have some adult conversation.
Yeah.
So I managed to escape one night a week. But with her whinging on about missing James Henry's developments, and I'm thinking, well, stop at home. Yeah, I can totally sympathise with people who have to have 2 lots of money coming in, but not when she didn't need to.
Right.
I think she could have paid more attention to life in the village and done things that would have helped the village. But we wouldn't have a show, would we? With all the shenanigans going on.
Yeah. It was quite the village to be in. Who knows how she really grew up, because if her mom left when she was, I thought I heard 10 when she was in therapy with Dr. Timoney.
Yeah, it might have been 10.
Yeah, I think it was 10. So you figure, who knows what Eleanor was like when she and Terry were together. We don't really know. I mean, we don't have any.
I was going to say, extrapolating back from what she was like when she turned up, she was totally self-centered and would use anybody to get what she wanted. So I would suspect that she wasn't dissimilar when she was younger.
Right. And she absolutely had an affair and ran off with the guy. So she could have been having affairs the whole time for all we know.
Yeah. She certainly wasn't a good mother, or what I would call a good mother, will we say.
And Louisa certainly, gives us the indication that her mom wasn't a good mom. Yeah. And you get the sense that Terry was always promising things that he didn't deliver.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's right. In her own way, she had just as hard a time, I think, as Martin did, because his parents just didn't want him at all.
Right. Yeah, I don't get the sense that Louisa was necessarily belittled as much.
No. I think she knew she was loved. And I think that made a difference. Plus, she was never beaten. She wasn't abused in that sense.
Right.
But I think neglect. I do think she was neglected.
Yeah, neglected and abandoned.
Yeah.
And learned to probably not depend on people. And that could certainly feed into this idea that, I don't want to be dependent on someone else's income. I could see that in her. But in her defense, I can see her being very conflicted about wanting to be home, wanting to be working. Yeah. And then she did try to come up with something that could give her a bit of both.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. With the child counseling.
I think that's probably to her credit, in that she's realized there's a problem and she can do something about it. So I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt.
Yes. I'm always trying to defend the underdog in the argument.
Yeah.
No matter where my heart lies.
No, I can sympathize with that. I must admit, I spent a long time watching the series, trying to have some sympathy for Louisa. And then when I've watched the whole series several times, and I think it was about the third time through that it sort of occurred to me, yes, he is difficult to get to know. And she is putting a lot into trying to kindle a relationship, but she just doesn't understand at all how he is and what he I won't say needs, what he will accept.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
He'll
know
accept a lot. He'll put up with a lot.
To be with her, yes.
Yeah.
You wouldn't put up for 5 seconds anybody else.
No.
But what he puts up with from her is incredible.
Yeah.
Given his background.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough of them. What about season 8?
I know. Season 8. What do we got going on here?
I thought Joe's acting at the wedding when he was stood at the altar, absolutely cross-legged.
Yeah.
And then
you felt for him, didn't you?
He did, yeah. And I was sorry that it didn't go through. I thought he would have settled down a lot more. But then we had to put up with all the whinging.
Yes.
About how people left him.
And he just thought Clive was a good listener and he was dead.
Yeah. It was funny, but it was sad as well.
Yes. Yeah. I swear to God, I passed that kidney stone at the same time.
Yeah.
It was like, ow, 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 ow.
I hope I never, ever get anything like that. It looked excruciating.
I loved Rosie the curate. She's just trying her best to get that wedding to be taken seriously. And you can tell these guys, they haven't discussed anything. And yet, she's been married 2 times already or 3 times already?
Twice, I think.
Okay, so this would have been her 3rd and Joe's 2nd, and they haven't had any discussion about kids. But when you think about it, neither have Martin and Louisa.
No, they didn't.
And they're going to get married in 3 weeks from fundamentally their engagement, right? 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's probably good they didn't get married then.
Yeah, to some extent, I can understand the haste. Neither of them are getting any younger. And after all, Louisa assumed what she assumed. Martin assumed what he assumed. And James Henry was a bolt from the blue.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, I am, you watch the whole series, and I know we're talking about 8, but we can see this in 8, that Martin has this assumption the entire time that she was going to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure that when he thought she'd be a lovely mother, it was a lovely mother who was home all the time, loving up her kid.
Yeah. Yes, I got that impression.
And it comes through in his comments about her going, as much as he supports her going to school for the child counseling, he sneaks in some comments.
Yeah, he does. I feel really sorry for him because his idea of an ideal mum, as you say, is a mum who stays at home, looks after a child, and is always there. This is not what Louisa wants at all. She wants the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
As you say, I don't think either of them have talked over the ideas that each of them want. Even after they've been married for a while, they still haven't really spoken. It's obvious to me anyway.
I think so too. And yet in this season, this is season 8 when they've just recovered from, Dr. Timony and the Wintons taking him hostage, and Louisa realizes he doesn't have to be normal and it's okay to be unusual. But and Ruth warns them very early in season 8 that the post-therapy time can be difficult.
Yeah, I think Louisa had got the idea that during the therapy that they should be talking, but it was obvious in season 8 that they hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
From the start, I had expected more communication between the two of them at a level that was at least not as confrontational, but they seem to have drifted into Martin is taking care of things, Louisa is doing her own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And seemingly without making any concessions to a normal family life. She creates the rota and then promptly proceeds to ignore it and get him to look after James Henry or pick him up from school or drop him off at nursery.
Right.
Well, it suits her.
And I think, I'm going to defend the underdog again, that because somebody got sick, right? So I think Pippa got sick and couldn't do something. And
yeah.
So that's one of those it happens kind of things.
Yes.
But
not necessarily regularity that it does.
Yeah. But, he's like, you got to update the rota. And then she goes to do it. And he's like, I need my pen. He takes his pen.
There was some give and take, I have to admit. Although he was supportive of her doing the course and he could see that the end result might be beneficial for James, he still kept on twittering about how hard it would be. She might not pass.
Right.
This sort of thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was a bit off.
Yeah, it's a little unkind of Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, perhaps he just wanted her to give up everything and stop at home.
Yeah.
That was maybe his recurring thought.
Yeah, they're really not well matched.
I think they would have been if they'd actually spoken. I think that's what it boiled down to in the end, didn't it? That they just didn't really have a clue about what the other one wanted. They were intent on their own wishes to the exclusion of the other.
It's not always explained to us what they see in each other, right?
No.
Because at least with Dr. Timony, Martin says she's beautiful, she's a wonderful mother, which it's a recurring thing. I mean, you see that throughout the whole series, that he can't keep his eyes off of her and thinks that she would just be a lovely mother. And then when she doesn't take care of herself during her pregnancy, he's all over it. When she's not the stay-at-home mom he expects, he's not a super support for that idea. And her attraction always to me seems to be he's an amazing doctor in a crisis.
Yeah. Yes.
And he's consistent, right? He's got integrity and he's consistent.
Yes.
Reliable.
Yeah. I think reliable is the key word there, in that she is fairly sure, nearly, we'll say 90% sure, that he would never let her down or leave.
Right. But we've got Sally and Clive, who seem to be trying to, put things back together. Yeah.
Yeah. I was sad when Clive passed away. And I was a bit puzzled by Sally's lack of reaction. Whether she was trying to just block it out or what, his death didn't seem to mean a great deal. And I think the fact that we didn't see a funeral contributed to that. It may be that she did her grieving in private and is a bit like Martin in that she can hide her feelings when she wanted to.
Yeah. To me, I think it would be shock first, right?
Yeah.
Because she just left him. He was fine, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's just that first, like, I get what you just told me, but I can't process that.
Yeah.
And so she just retreats. And then I think it's some level of denial.
Yeah, could be. She never has that feeling of denial with Martin, though, does she? Oh, some of those scenes make me cringe. They really do.
I just laugh.
One of the things that I did like about episode 2 was the daughter of the estate agent. She was ill with, I think it was tonsillitis.
Yes, Astrid.
Astrid, that's right. And when Martin was treating her at the end, she sort of said, "Am I going to die?" And instead of saying, no, sweetie, you're going to be fine, he says, yes, everybody's going to, everybody will die.
Right.
And then there's a pregnant pause, I'll say, and he says, but not today.
Yes.
And you're sort of on the edge of your seat thinking, oh, don't say it.
Not for this little girl,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's been a couple of times where, wasn't it on the Planet Walk when the little girl passes out? I can't remember what season that was.
Yeah.
I think it already happened.
Yeah. She had Kawasaki disease.
Right. Yes. Well done. See, when I say you're a know-it-all, you can't tell me you're not.
A bit like him. Symptoms I can remember. I couldn't tell you what the kid's name was, but
I don't know if I think we might have known that one's name. I'm not sure, but it's like, is she going to die? It's like, she could.
Yeah.
And Louise is like, don't say that. It's like,
yeah. And the kids are all going, ah!
Exactly. Well, he's nothing if not correct.
Truthful.
Yeah. No filter. No filter. Yeah.
Martin doesn't have that filter.
No, he would just say, horrible idea.
Yeah.
All right. Or just don't be ridiculous, you idiot. But I cracked up with Mrs. Tischel. You're right. She doesn't seem to mourn. She does talk to Clive, which is
Yeah.
disconcerting, right? Because you never want Mrs. Tishel to be going off the deep end because she's done it before
Yeah.
with not good results. And, you know, even within the season, having just lost her husband, she's still enamored of the Doc.
Yes, yeah. But I think to some extent that might be something to cling on to for her.
Maybe a little lifeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did think she would eventually, after she'd been away and come back, I did think she would relinquish
Mhm.
the feelings, but no, she didn't. She was always interested.
Yeah. And the feelings didn't get her in trouble. It was the self-medicating,
Yeah.
right, that really got her in trouble. But you have to laugh when you see Sigourney Weaver coming to town,
Yes.
right? And just the fact that the two of those actresses are very good friends, how much fun it must have been to have a fight
Yes.
and to be angling for the same man.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure that Sigourney, as the character of Beth Trewick, whether she was angling after Martin or just wanted to get him over there to the States in order for him to be a successful doctor. I know she'd been married twice before and both of them were doctors, so the hint was there.
Yes. And did you know he's the youngest surgeon to ever qualify?
Yeah, I knew that.
Not you. That was a quote from her.
You said I was annoyed also. I had to say yes.
No, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
He
funny.
was. She did have him down pat, though. Definitely.
Yeah.
Did Sigourney.
Yes.
One thing I did like was when Sally had pushed her over and Beth said, "You're crazy." And Sally says, "No, I'm not. And I've got a certificate to prove it."
Yes. That was a great line.
And then stormed off.
I would give every one of the writers of this show a hug.
Definitely, yes. They've been outstanding, really.
Yes. Yes.
Keeping it going and always seeming to add something to the scene.
Just a little aside, I just finished Anthony Hopkins' book, his memoir.
Right. Yeah.
And I've loved Anthony Hopkins. I go through these obsessions with actors where I
Yeah.
realize what an excellent actor they are, and then I consume everything that they've been in.
Yes.
And he's always been one of my favorites. So I actually was listening to the audiobook, which was masterfully done by Kenneth Branagh. You really felt like you were listening to Anthony Hopkins. And then I get to this chapter, I almost had to pull off the road. He said that he and his wife enjoy the show Doc Martin. And when they were watching it, his wife said to him, "That's you." And because I always tell you that I identify with Martin, like I feel like there's a lot of Martin in me. I was like, maybe that's why I like Anthony Hopkins. Like, we're all of a kind or something.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that. I think I identify to some extent with Martin. Looking at the overarching theme of Doc Martin, it's Beauty and the Beast. That's what it is. Just another telling of Beauty and the Beast. And
Yeah, it's a common
yeah,
theme.
and Doc
Yeah.
Martin fits into that really nicely, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly he's beast-like and she's beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's overbearing, but she's a nag.
Is she a nag? I'm wondering, how she doesn't sort of talk to him very much other than to chide him to do something more normally. I'm wondering if she's actually a little bit frightened of him, because early on in the relationship, she noticed, I think, how if he was touched, he jumped. And if other people sort of touch him, he's away with it. He doesn't like. And I think to some extent, early on, she was quite frightened to get too close to him.
Frightened frightened for her well-being frightened, or not wanting to offend frightened?
Yes, I think not wanting to offend, because
Okay.
I think she does try very much to be a people pleaser rather than being like him, who couldn't give tuppence
Right.
for what anybody thinks.
And I'm wondering if does he not care, or does he use it as a defense mechanism?
Yeah, I think it's a defense mechanism. Do we actually find out to what degree he was beaten as a boy? I don't think we do.
Well, what we've heard is that he's been locked in a cupboard.
Yeah.
And we've heard that he's been hit with a table tennis bat and something else, a belt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way he tosses it off as if it didn't cause him a problem,
No.
I took from that it was not an uncommon occurrence.
Yeah.
So to me, it feels like he's been isolated, beaten, belittled on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be touched, especially from somebody he doesn't trust.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, if he does not trust, and he doesn't trust really anybody.
No.
I mean,
I'm not sure he even trusts Louisa.
I don't think he trusts her to not break his heart.
Yeah. Well, she's walked out on him.
Yeah. When you said that you thought she was afraid of him, I thought, actually, I think he's afraid of her walking out.
Yeah.
What else do we have going on here? I liked Martin and Morwenna in season 8.
Yes. He was beginning to respect her more, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And she blossomed,
Mhm.
is the best word I can say. She definitely blossomed. But that partly was after the Beth Trewick had given her the book on
Yes.
asserting yourself.
Yes. Yes.
So she'd learned and she'd done it.
Yes. She did great.
I like the readjustment of salary.
Yes.
And
Yep.
you had to be quick and bargain her down.
That's right. But hey, she got one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Good for her.
We see James starting to talk.
Yeah. That's what annoyed me most, that episode about Louisa saying, but I didn't hear his first word. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And my instinct was, well, quit the job and stop at home.
Right. I mean, she could absolutely miss his first word, but the fact that she's going to keep missing that first word.
Yeah, I think
The fact that Joe got to hear it, I think really annoyed her.
I think that was reinforcing her idea that she was missing out too much.
Yeah. And she even comments on it. I think it's to her credit. You figure she's achieved what she wanted to set out to do. She's become the headmistress. So that has to be tough to give up. But she realizes if she doesn't give that up, she will miss her son's development. But she won't give up work completely. She'll find something that accommodates both of her needs.
Yes. I think that she only wants to give up being a head teacher because she has to fill in so much paperwork and read so much that she's not interacting with the children. I don't think it's got anything to do with James Henry.
Really? That's funny.
Yeah, I just don't. It's more, again, more of her selfishness. She wants the interaction with children, but she's not that bothered about her own. You know, if she wanted interaction with children, why didn't she stop at home and interact with James?
Yeah. Well, maybe she'd be a crappy parent if she did that.
Maybe.
See, here I am in Camp Martin trying to defend Louisa.
Yeah, I'm not having it.
Good thing there's an ocean between us.
Exactly, yes. No, I mean, I can see both sides of it. I do, it's just that following my own experiences, I gave up work when I was expecting. I stayed off when number 2 arrived. And to be honest, I didn't go back till he was 19.
If you could do it, right? And if you're enjoying it, that's lovely.
Yeah. But, I sort of think, well, if I can do it, why can't you?
Yeah.
I suppose your life experiences colour your expectations of others more than you would think at the time.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's all we've got, right?
Yeah.
It's who we are. We haven't lived more than one life. We've got Ruth and Bert and Al falling out of a business proposition, right? But then falling back into one.
Yes. I found that Bert infuriates me.
Yeah.
He really does. He makes a mess and then just hands it all over to Al.
Yeah.
But let Al come up with something for himself, and he's overcome with disappointment that he can't be part of it as well.
Right.
And yet, he's going to mess it up.
Yes, it's true.
That long-suffering Al, he's a saint.
And at the same time, you got to wonder, like, how did Al manage to become Al? Because Bert was his only parent.
Yeah. But
how'd that work out?
Well, how did Louisa become Louisa?
Yeah.
I mean, she's probably one of the first in the village, I think, to go to uni.
Yeah.
And then she became a teacher, and she's well respected. How did she do that, given her parents?
Yeah. I wonder if this is the it takes a village. Like, did the village raise these kids?
I think she mentioned at one point that Joan had helped her, but I got the impression that Joan helped a lot of people in the village from time to time.
Yeah.
She was a lovely character.
Yeah, I liked Joan. She had, a spine to her. She had her opinions.
and wasn't slow to share them either.
No, not at all. I've always thought it was interesting when Joan is your chalk and cheese and people can't change.
Yeah.
And Ruth is people can change, but you have to work harder than most.
Yes. Yeah. It was two opposite views.
Mm-hmm.
I tended to put more weight on what Ruth said than what Joan said.
Yeah.
Because of, obviously, Ruth's psychiatric background.
Yep. Yep.
But then I think she realised that perhaps Martin couldn't change.
Do you think Ruth thought that?
I think he mellowed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that he changed.
I think in season 7 when she was just like, you have to change, and if you're not going to, you should just leave that poor girl alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the end of 6, wasn't it?
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, because the 7 is when they actually go to therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right, because 6, yeah, she talks him into fighting for Louisa and actually trying to go to the airport and fetch her.
Did she say that? You know, I can't remember Ruth saying that to Martin.
Not in those words. But I remember she did say, you know, you just leave that poor girl alone if you're not going to change.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah. Because I was pleasantly surprised when he was in the surgery and was ringing up to get an airplane ticket to the south of Spain. So
I thought Ruth
good.
encouraged him to do that. Or maybe it was when she was in Spain. I think it might have been later when she was in Spain and Ruth was like, you're telling me you haven't been in touch with your wife and you haven't called? Like,
yeah,
you haven't taken a proactive action here? What's wrong with you?
Well, I think that was when he came back from seeing Ruth after telling her that Louisa had gone. That was when he made the phone call.
Right.
And while he was making the phone call, he got the x-rays or the scans of Louisa's faulty vein.
Right.
And of course, all ideas of going to Spain were gone.
Right.
It was then I must get to the airport and stop her from leaving. That was what I had interpreted from that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, though, if that, in that scene, if she sort of encouraged him, like, didn't you try to stop her?
Yeah, yeah. And Martin being Martin, he would think he didn't want to force his feelings onto Louisa. I think that was why they broke up the first time. If he'd said, I love you, I want to marry you, but I don't feel as if I'm good enough, that might have been a whole new dimension to go in.
Right.
So that's me rewriting the story.
No, but you're right. I mean, the sense that he says, I wouldn't make you happy and you wouldn't make me happy, which I've always wanted to know what the explanation of that was. And I also want to know what's in her letter, because she writes him a note, but we never get to see what was in that letter.
She tells him what's in the letter.
But all she says is, I tell you I love you. I don't know. I don't get the sense that she explains the whole thing.
Well, do they ever explain anything to each other?
This is true.
I think, as I say, I think Martin wouldn't want to force somebody to do something just because he wanted it. So I think that's why he said, you wouldn't make me happy, because he wouldn't like seeing her unhappy.
That could be. Yeah. I think he would, if he could make her eat a healthy diet, he would. That's
only healthy in his terms.
Yes. But I mean, like, as far he wouldn't make somebody do something. I think he would. If I think he would just, this is what we're eating, sweetheart.
Yeah. Well, that's his difficulty in relating to normality. Everything he does seems to me to be by the book.
It makes sense to him. And he doesn't have a sense that there is any other logical way to do it.
No.
There's no recollection of a chocolate biscuit is just tasty, right? Even if it's going to be bad for you. Sometimes it's nice to feed the taste bud.
I wonder when his rigid diet came in. Did it come when he was 16 and was able to give it serious thought, or was it forced on him from being 2 or 3? You know, where did the idea of you have to be on this rigid diet, no fats?
I'll bet you it's a medical thing. I bet you it was med school.
It could be, yeah.
Because if you're a vascular specialist, you're seeing all that cholesterol and all that other gunk.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you're a vascular surgeon. So when you open up veins and that, you'd see it.
Yep. Yep. And, diabetes and how people can't heal and
Yeah.
all those
Yeah.
sorts of things.
Too rigid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he'd always be like that, though,
Yeah.
especially when it came to medicine and lifestyles.
I think it's a medical school thing. I think when he saw the benefits of a good diet or the disadvantages of a poor diet,
Yeah.
when he cut open bodies, he just became very rigid.
The trouble with him is he thinks that's the only way to live.
Yes.
He doesn't see that anybody else has a choice.
Yeah. Or that there's pleasure in food.
Mm.
It sounds like he's also learned how to cook very tasty things to him, even though they're very healthy, whereas he doesn't appreciate an apple pie.
Yeah, I think he would once he gets a bit loosened off.
Yeah.
We say.
Unclear how we get them there.
Yeah, I think he'll. Yeah, that's too far in the future.
I love talking to somebody who knows more than I do.
To some extent, that's down to the fact that I must have watched the series 8 or 9 times.
I have done the same,
When I go through it, I pick up little bits. I mean, I was on Team Martin. I was firmly on Team Martin. But the more I watched it and the more I watched what he's saying, the more I think, yeah, people are right. He is a surly so-and-so.
Yeah.
And that maybe I shouldn't have the sympathy for him that I do.
Yeah, I have always been on Team Martin, and like I said, I think it's because I identify with him, so I can kind of feel like, but for the grace of God, go I. But I side with him. I recognize his shortcomings.
Yes.
Which is why I yell at the screen, right? But at the same time, from the marital perspective, I just have this sense of he's never misled you. He has been this way the whole time. So it's not like you dated and he was one person and then you married him and he's a different person and you don't like what you got.
Yeah.
This is what he was. And he didn't promise he'd be different. He didn't, you didn't extort any compromises.
No. He's Doc Martin, 100%.
Yep.
Stick a rock.
Yep. Just what it's written on the tin.
All right.
All right. So, Pauline, it's always great to talk to you. I'm so happy when you make time to be on the podcast. Folks, if you've enjoyed this, please like it, subscribe to the feed, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Chesla.
Thanks for joining Podcast Portwenn. Podcast Portwenn is an independent fan production, not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Buffalo Pictures, ITV, Fox, or the creators of Doc Martin or Best Medicine.